Biden White House admitted on Thursday that it should not have posted a picture showing the faces of members of an elite U.S. Army Special Forces unit on assignment in Israel when it posted a photo of them in uniform shaking hands with the president. A White House spokesperson told Fox News, quote, "As soon as this was brought to our attention, we immediately deleted the photo. We regret the error and any issues this may have caused."
Meanwhile, President Biden had this to say to reporters while on Air Force One. Let's watch.
So you're talking?
Yes.
Okay. So Sisi agreed to open that up?
Yes. For this purpose. Not to allow a lot of people out, but to open it up for this purpose.
For humanitarian assistance.
For the trucks to be able to get through.
And is that just?
Well, you guys are such a pain in the neck.
Sorry, sir.
But here's the deal.
So I don't know if President Biden there was saying, oh, you're answering or asking questions rather from behind me. I have to turn my neck so much. Or if he is saying he really hates fielding questions from reporters. I'm going to go with the latter. I'm going to go with Biden was very tired and very honest on Air Force One and didn't really want to field questions from reporters. I don't know why you would invite them in that case. As far as the doxing goes, that is such a terrible response. That does not address the situation with the gravity that it exists. There are a lot of people who join the military because it's advertised as guaranteed income, stable. You can potentially get a college degree paid for in the United States. It's seen as a way out to be socially mobile if you're working class in the U.S. A lot of these people, I'm sure, do not want to be held accountable for the geopolitical decisions of the United States.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, basically the White House response to doing this was just oopsie. Like, did the people in the White House press office not know that that the president was meeting with people who obviously should not have their faces plastered over the internet? And the fact that it took the White House so long to take it down, hundreds of thousands of people, if not more, had already seen the photo by the time they realized their little whoopsie and had taken it down. And even more egregiously, this is not the first time that the Biden White House has posted a photo that exposed people who really ought not to have their faces all over Instagram or Twitter. If you remember back during Biden's ultimately deadly and disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, they posted a photo during criticism that the president was not sort of on top of things and wasn't working on what was happening on the ground in Kabul and other places in Afghanistan. They posted a photo of him at Camp David working in one of the conference rooms, and he's having a conversation with his aides. It included Vice President Kamala Harris and other members of his administration from the Pentagon and the State Department, but that it also included the faces and identification of people working at the CIA station in Doha. And so again, they faced the same issue where it was like, hey, maybe the White House should not be tweeting out photos of who's running the CIA operation in the Middle East right now, but they clearly didn't learn their lesson then if they're again posting pictures like the one that they got caught doing just recently. And again, is this just the result of having inexperienced and I guess unqualified staff working in the press office and not checking on photos before they're released and sent publicly? Is this something where they just don't care? Maybe they're just thinking, we have to get this photo up because the president is taking heat on Twitter, so we better respond with this Instagram post. There's really no explanation because, again, they did this before, faced the blowback, and then continued to not be careful with what they're posting.
Spencer, at least Joe Biden, when he exposes declassified information and secrets that should be kept within the administration, he does it for all of the public to see instead of being so selfish like Donald Trump, keeping all of those documents in the bathroom in Mar-a-Lago and only sharing them with his close friends and buddies who frequent his establishment. I mean, Joe Biden's a man of the people for making it public. I do agree that whoopsies summarizes the response from the administration here. And I think perhaps it's just bold and arrogant of the United States to say, you know what, we can protect ourselves because we have so much money for our military that we don't even care if you see their faces. You can't get our guys anyway. That is absolutely the kind of moral hazard thinking that goes into posting a photo like this. Also, why would you think it was a photo op in the first place? Why were cameras there in the first place? No one thought that would be an issue. I mean, it goes to show that maybe the guy who's very sleepy on Air Force One was making the decisions there. No one who's an aide to Joe Biden was like, sir, perhaps not. Perhaps we don't expose the identities of U.S. Special Forces soldiers at a time of a very intense conflict. I don't know. It seems to me that whoever's making decisions around Joe Biden doesn't have Joe Biden's best interests or the country's.
No, I think that's been pretty clear for most of the Biden administration, that his aides are generally more frustrated with him and generally trying to sort of just guide him and focus on the very bare minimum of things that he needs to do, that I think maybe situations like this are slipping through the cracks, where nobody thought, hey, maybe this should just be an intimate moment with the president, thanking members of the armed services for their service and what they're doing to keep Americans safe at home and abroad, and maybe shouldn't be just transparently a photo op, as apparently it was. And I'm trying to figure out how to come at this, but I see your classified documents at Mar-a-Lago in a bathroom, a very nice one, I should point out, and raise you a box of classified documents sitting next to a Corvette in a garage in Delaware. I guess, again, that is more a bit man of the people, but unless he was having a garage sale, how would his neighbors in Rehoboth Beach have ever known what was in those boxes?
Yeah, and I love that Donald Trump was like, no, they're mine. I'm keeping them. You can't have them. Biden was like, oh, I didn't even know those were there. I'm not sure which is worse, actually. Probably trying to keep all of the documents and, skirting the law even when you've broken it. But also Mike Pence having classified documents. Why do all of these folks have documents laying around? I can understand that there's some security concerns if they're always accessing them on like Google Drive or something digital, right? If hacking happens, we have to use paper, but they're just lying around in people's garages and bathrooms anyway. Perhaps we have to go digital, but I think shows weakness in U.S. cybersecurity that we don't feel confident doing that. We could have just had folks break into Joe Biden's garage or go into that bathroom in Mar-a-Lago to gain access. You don't even have to hack into someone's computer. But I think in any case, what's going on with this administration right now just shows messiness, especially when you have Israel, which is supposedly our ally, not even giving us the intelligence that they have. In the instance of the hospital bombing, and we'll get into this more in the show, I think, later on, but why is it that Joe Biden's like, well, a lot of the evidence, points that it wasn't Israel? Why don't you just ask them? They're our allies. We fund their military. Wouldn't they tell you? And this puts us in a weird situation where we're like, okay, so either you know the truth and you're not telling it to us, Joe Biden, or they didn't tell you the truth, or you're skeptical if your ally is capable of telling you the truth. Like, what is going on here that we're not sure if one of our allies actually did bomb this hospital that's become the center of the media this week? Why don't we have that intelligence? It just looks very messy inside the Biden administration right now.
Yeah, I think maybe the lack of cohesive or coherent information from the White House might be because they end up spending so much time trying to figure out who has classified documents where and what's been posted on Instagram and Twitter. It seems like most of their focus is always just kind of on cleaning up stuff, right? I mean, whether it's President Biden, thankfully in his speech last night didn't say anything that had to be immediately cleaned up, but in other major speeches on foreign policy and U.S. policy, President Biden has frequently had to have a cleanup on Aisle Joe after his speech, whether it was just ad-libbing the line saying that Putin cannot remain in power while he was speaking in Poland. I think at least twice or maybe three times now, he's said that it was the U.S. position that if China invaded Taiwan, U.S. forces would get involved and defend Taiwan, which is not the case. And so I do think that this White House spends a good deal of time, rather than sort of proactively looking at what they're going to do next, they end up spending just as much, if not more time, cleaning up what Joe Biden just said. And I think, that clip at the beginning of this segment with the president on Air Force One was just put him to bed. Do not send him back to the press cabin on Air Force One. He has no business being back there talking to reporters when he clearly is sleep deprived, is jet lagged, is whatever it is. He should not have been back there taking questions. And it probably was a pain in his neck because he didn't want to do it either. But I'm sure at some point, as we've heard from many outlets, Joe Biden is not known as an accessible president to reporters and to the press. And so they probably thought, well, this might be the safest opportunity we have, and just sort of rolled him back on a drink cart to the press cabin and said good luck. I do think it was interesting in that clip. You saw some of it, but if you watch the full clip, looking at all of his aides surrounding him and the looks on their faces as they're listening, you've got Secretary of State Blinken, you've got the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, you've got John Kirby from the National Security Council, and they're all kind of peering around him like, oh dear, where is this answer going to go? And I don't think they ever know necessarily where it's going to go, and that's why we get into so many of these messes where what he says is not what the United States policy actually is. We will closely keep tracking, though, of course, what Joe Biden says and whether it's right or wrong. But we'll be right back with more Rising after this.